The contested land in St. Thomas, once fertile and valuable, lay in dispute between three greedy brothers who clung to a legal claim that only served their ambition. Years before, the land had been willed to them, but the Sears fighters, recognizing the brothers' selfish intentions, transformed it into a riverbed. Now, the greedy three brothers, determined to reverse the land's fate, assembled an army from foreign shores, hoping that brute force would win where greed alone had failed. The brothers hired fighters from 10 countries, believing that a display of power and numbers would intimidate their opponents. Most hailed from Africa, but there were others from the Middle East, South America, and even Eastern Europe. They brought with them an array of equipment: Gatling guns, helicopters, armored cars, planes, and ships, a sheer arsenal meant to flood the battlefield with sound, fury, and firepower. Led by the wise John O.C. Woogum and the fearless Hemel, they devised a strategy that only a few could comprehend and even fewer could anticipate. They relied not on weapons but on silence, strategy, and the raw power of surprise. The fighters of Henderson Ave and Tower Hill had developed a skill that was the envy and mystery of all, a mastery of shapeshifting that could turn them into tanks, trees, boulders, or even each other's likenesses. The foreign fighters spread through the region, positioning their equipment with confidence. They didn't know what was coming, and the Henderson Ave Hill and Tower Hill teams intended to keep it that way. As dawn broke, the three brothers watched as their army, rich with machinery, stood ready to face what they thought were ill-prepared locals. But the silence on the other side unnerved them. No war cry, no rallying call, just the quiet hum of the land itself. That was when the first attack hit. Carmen, the queen, with her masterful use of archery and shadow tactics, took down a squadron of heavily armed fighters, leaving only the sound of her bow cutting the air. She melted back into the foliage, becoming part of the landscape itself. Booby the Six Killer, Lucan the Fireman, Bigger Jah Rastafari, and Ike the Lion executed strikes that were swift and devastating. Lucan shapeshifted into a large boulder, immobilizing an armored car. Bigger, known as transformed into a towering tree, then descended on an unsuspecting squad, scattering their ranks. The shapeshifting took the enemy off guard. None could predict the wave of assaults. Even the air seemed to attack, with Auntie from next door striking as a sudden gust, landing blows before retreating into the cover of the windswept grasses. The foreign fighters struggled to regroup. They had not anticipated facing invisible and unpredictable attacks. Waves of men in camouflage and steel were now faced with shadows that seemed to come alive and fight back. With no visible enemies to face, panic started to spread among the ranks. Then the final blow arrived. John O.C. Woogum himself, disguised as one of the enemy commanders, led a segment of the foreign fighters into a narrow valley. Once in, he unleashed a hail of fire from his Tower Hill comrades above, sending the foreign fighters scrambling in all directions. Those who could escape stumbled over each other, clawing to get out of the valley. The sound of whirring blades filled the air, but it wasn't from their own helicopters. The fighters from Henderson Ave Hill, having shape-shifted into formations of birds, circled above, screeching, and swooping down. By dusk, the three brothers could only watch as their grand army faltered, scattered, and fled the scene. Overwhelmed and humiliated, they were forced to abandon their claim, at least for the time being. The foreign fighters, having learned a hard lesson, withdrew from St. Thomas, vowing to return with stronger forces. But the Henderson Ave Hill and Tower Hill fighters remained grounded in their covert strength, invisible yet omnipresent, a force as enduring as the land itself. The battle for St. Thomas was far from over, but the three brothers now knew that brute force alone was no match for the power of the Henderson Ave Hill and the Tower Hill fighters.